Sarah Khan, age 22.
Errol Alexander Kerr, 24.
I didn't know your middle name was Alexander.
Well, now you do. So yeah, no, we are Game Assist. We are a multimedia project aiming to talk about representation, identity within gaming. Not just obviously video games themselves, but the industry as a whole. Well, people don't talk about representation in gaming on the same level as we talk about in TV and film and other forms of media.
But you know, so many people go through life not seeing themselves reflected on screen, and it has like a real impact on people's lives.
Like for example, I didn't see anyone who would describe as not like an older individual in a game using like a walking stick, for example, and having those same proper like movements of using a walking stick until this year. I didn't notice, like for example, I'm autistic, so I didn't see a decently represented autistic character on screen until I was 15.
Like as a queer person, I had never seen a queer woman in a video game until I was 18. And when it came to kind of like people of color, you would see these awful like stereotypes in games like Call of Duty, pretty racist stereotypes.
Both.
Yeah.
So I grew up playing Tomb Raider. I don't know my dad let me play Tomb Raider as a child, but here we are. If we go with Lara as a character, Lara has obviously changed over the years. She's far less sexualized as she was. Mortal Kombat 11 has just come out, and you've got whingy gamers complaining that the female characters aren't sexy. In Mortal Kombat, a game where the objective is to beat someone to death and then rip their arms off. The conversations are isolated, so that we talk about Lara Croft. We talk about specific series of games, or specific franchises, or singular characters.
They have a lot of potential for telling a story and exploring a character, perhaps more so than any other medium because of the interactivity. For example, I don't think I've ever played a woman in a game and had the game kind of simulate or force me to engage with sexism. A lot of indie games are taking those risks, and we are seeing them kind of engage with social issues, but I think it's still like risky territory in terms of like money making for bigger studios, and I think that that's why like as an industry we haven't seen like a shift yet.
Like AAA games are just kind of starting to step into it. Indie devs have been doing this for years now. It's not just trying to tell a story to an audience, it's trying to convey a learned and known experience to an audience.
I think that that kind of brings us into the question of not just the stories that games are telling, but who they're told by. There is a massive discrepancy now that isn't necessarily acknowledged between who games are made by and for, and who actually plays games.
Yeah.
Because like I speak to a lot of other women who play video games, and increasingly women gamers are actually like over 50% of the demographic, which is like completely contrary to people's stereotypical image of the gamer.
On top of that, like you've got 20% of the population is disabled in one way, shape or form, meaning that like even if we go with regular numbers of people who play video games, there's going to be a bunch of disabled people of all different like formats of disability, like still accessing and playing these games one way or another.
Yeah.
White hat wearing, neck beardy type who lives in his parents' basement. You know exactly who I'm talking about. That kind of spewing sexism and racism down the line. I'm going to be honest, that's not a majority. That's an incredibly loud and uncomfortable and nasty group of individuals who does not make up the base of who plays games these days. Now, like that image of that gamer bro, this unshaven, unclean, lives in his parents' basement or lives in a bedroom still with his parents in his mid to late 20s. These specific narratives are heavily rooted in disability discrimination. This idea that as an autistic person myself, I have grown up being told that would be me. Those are very real fears for people, and they're transplanted onto these gamer boys who all of a sudden are experiencing discrimination, which is not the case. So we're currently talking about and highlighting games from both the indie and AAA industry that kind of talk about these different experiences a little bit more, whether it's mental health, whether it's disability or race or class or gender, sexuality. Like we talk about games we're talking about games that do this well, we're talking about games that don't do it so well. Like it kind of reviewing, but stepping away from the expected reviewy stuff.
As well as the kind of let's plays and critiques that we intend on publishing. We are in talks with some indie developers about offering consultancy on the accessibility of games, both in terms of their playability and in terms of how well they represent certain issues or certain identities.
And so it's not just about us and our experiences and our knowledge, it's making sure that this entire medium tells the stories to people and that people can access those stories.
Kind of increasing the potential for games to be used as social enterprise themselves.